Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, as the case may be. I am Richard Gottfried. I was for many years, a little ways uptown from here, member of the New York State Assembly and chair of the Health Committee in the Assembly. To a group like this, I'd also like to point out that from the time I was about 4 years old in the early 1950s, my mother was a New York City high school math teacher until she retired in the mid-70s. And the retiree system did very well by her. She was a New York City retiree for 38 years. And my mother-in-law was a Long Island high school English teacher in Carl Place High School, and union member to the day she died. So we are here to discuss the issue of New York City public employee retiree health benefits and some of the changes that the city and the public employee unions have been trying to, I would say, impose, and we'll hear more about that. What I will start out with is to introduce our panelists in the order as they're sitting next to me. Neil Frumkin is a DC 37 retiree. Marianne Pizzatola is a New York City employee retiree and head of the cross-union retiree,
New York City retirees.
New York City retirees. There are a variety of different organizations. I have a hard time sorting them out. And then is our leader and host, Council Member Chris Marte, who has a piece of legislation on this topic, which he will tell us about, and Michelle Keller, also a DC 37 retiree. And we will be joined shortly by Kyle Simmons, who is a DC 37 local president. Not the DC 37, not the district president, that's Henry Garrido, but the president, yes. I'm just clarifying who's who and who isn't who. Kyle is the head of one of the numerous locals in DC 37. So with that, I think we turn first to Chris. You want to say a few words?
First, let's give it up for former Assembly Member David Gottfried for joining us today and being a lifetime hero for healthcare for all, not just active workers, retirees. He's been in this fight for a really long time, and I'm so honored to have him here on the Lower East Side for this town hall, as well as all the panelists who many of you know, whether it's through marching, through YouTube, or through discussions on how to make sure that we can win this fight. They're all here today to share their thoughts, their insights, and their recommendation on moving forward. But first, I wanted to start out with a brief presentation because I feel like everyone in this room is coming to this fight and coming to this town hall at different levels. And so we want to level set with some basic information, and then we'll open it up to the conversation and of course to your questions. But we're here tonight because healthcare for city employees and retirees is facing a crisis. Mayor Eric Adams and the Municipal Labor Committee, made up of all public sector unions, primarily DC 37 and UFT, are trying to force 250,000 retirees off of their traditional Medicare and move them into a privatized Medicare Advantage plan. Retirees are being told that this is necessary for the city to save money. Active employees are being told that if retirees aren't put on Medicare Advantage, then the unions will have to start charging high premiums for healthcare visits. The mayor and the unions are pitting active workers with retirees against each other, telling you that one group's healthcare has to be cut to support the other's healthcare. Before we open it up, we're going to go through a presentation that lays all of this out, what it means, what are we doing here, what's happening to our city, and the future of this fight. I think first it's useful to understand the differences between traditional Medicare and Medicaid Advantage. Traditional Medicare, which has been around since 1965, is true public health care that has very few barriers for seniors to receive medical care. With traditional Medicare, someone over the age of 65 can see almost any doctor whenever they need to. Medicare Advantage is much more newer. It's a form of privatized healthcare. Private health insurance companies like United, Humana, Aetna provide seniors health insurance, and then the companies are reimbursed by the federal government. Under Medicare Advantage, it's like having a regular health insurance with a private insurance company. There are restricted networks, higher costs, and prior authorization that can deny care. Congress has done multiple investigations which have found that these Medicare Advantage companies, especially Aetna, are using artificial intelligence to wrongfully deny people coverage so that companies can save more money and have bigger profits. To be clear, I'm not criticizing Medicare Advantage just because I don't like this plan for retirees. The problem with Medicare Advantage has been well documented by the news and by Congress. You can Google this yourself and see what's been written about the ways Medicare Advantage leads to worse health outcomes for seniors, especially those with the most serious health issues. In the last 2 months, over 70 members of Congress wrote a letter to Donald Trump raising these issues of Medicare Advantage. And in that letter, it states that Medicare Advantage is expected to cost taxpayers $1.2 trillion over the next decade, which is far more expensive than traditional Medicare. So it doesn't even make financial sense. Since 1967, the New York City retirees have been receiving traditional Medicare. It was an explicit promise made to city employees that when they retire, they will receive the best health care. The way it works is that the federal government pays for 80% of retiree health care, while the city pays the last 20% to cover retirees' Medicare Part B supplement. The city pays for that last 20% with a fund that's called Retiree Health Benefit Trust. So this whole controversy is about this 20% that the city has to pay. This was all decided by city council legislation and not collective bargaining. The city didn't always pay that full 20%. Throughout the 1970s, the 80s, the 90s, the city council passed legislation changing how much retirees' Part B supplements the city would pay. In 2001, the city council passed a bill and even overrode a mayoral veto so that the city would continue to pay all the retiree Part B supplements. Below right here is a quote from Robert Lidd, who was the director of the New York City Office of Labor Relations. In a letter to Mayor Ed Koch, he explained that retiree health care coverage is something that can only be decided by the city council, not collective bargaining. This is because, as we will discuss through our panel, retirees are not considered part of a union. Unions do not negotiate for the benefits of retired employees, only active members. The Medicare Advantage controversy first started with the MLC. As stated, retiree health care is paid for by the Retiree Health Benefit Trust. Active employees' health insurance premiums and other benefits are paid by another fund that's called the Welfare Stabilization Fund. This pays for active employee health care benefits. The Stabilization Fund, which is managed by the Municipal Labor Committee, but the city is legally required to provide the money for the stabilization fund. And during the de Blasio administration, the MLC realized that it was spending more money than the city was giving it. Because of this, the stabilization fund was losing money. And so they decided, in a way to get more money for that fund, was by putting retirees on a Medicare Advantage plan. By doing so, the city wouldn't have to pay that last 20% of Medicare Part B reimbursements. Instead, the entire cost of the health insurance will just be paid by the federal government. So around that $600 million that the city was spending on Part B will be given instead to this welfare stabilization fund. This is the same plan that Mayor Eric Adams has supported and still supports till today. So to be clear, despite what the mayor says and the unions, the switch to Medicare Advantage was not caused by the cost of retiree health care. Are there any active workers here? There's a few. You may have heard from your union that if this Medicare Advantage plan does not go through, you will have to start paying an extra $1,500 a year for your health insurance, or that you may have to add premiums to your health care. Have you heard that? This is misleading. The unions wouldn't have to charge more money for health care if the city funded the stabilization fund. But Mayor Adams and Speaker Adrian Adams have not wanted to find an alternative funding source. They put all their eggs in one basket, and that's Medicare Advantage plan. The City Council, in its history, has always stood with retirees, which is why I took action to introduce Intro 1096, which is a bill to protect retiree health care. It's a really simple bill. It just tells the city it cannot diminish retiree health care. The definition of diminish is as anything that will make it harder for retirees to access their health care, which specifically includes putting them on Medicare Advantage or another privatized Medicare program, or any program that will add costs, networks, or pre-authorization for medical procedures. This will ensure retirees to keep the traditional Medicare that was promised to them when they work for the city. You may be here, especially some of the active members, because you received letters from your unions telling you that Intro 1096 is dangerous. As you can see from this example, DC 37 is trying to argue that passing 1096 will be bad because there's no funding source for the city to continue to pay for the retiree health care. This is not true. If 1096 passes, and I know it will, retiree health benefit trusts will continue to pay for retiree health care. They are also arguing that if the city council passes 1096, it would violate collective bargaining laws. The argument being made by the Municipal Labor Committee is that healthcare benefits are something negotiated by the unions, so to mandate that retirees receive a specific healthcare plan would take negotiating powers away from the union. This is not true. In 1971, this was decided by the Supreme Court in a decision, Chemical Workers versus Pittsburgh Glass. Because of this case, every time the city council passed legislation on retiree health care, it never violated collective bargaining. Because unions cannot negotiate retiree benefits, the city council has to do it. To prove our point, I'd like to show you these examples. These are two letters written by DC 37 and the UFT testifying in support of city council legislation on retiree healthcare. If DC 37 and UFT believe that it would be illegal for the city council to pass legislation on retiree benefits, why did they testify in support of almost all past city council bills on retiree benefits? These bills passed 25 years ago, and since then, they had no impact on unions' collective bargaining power. And the city was still able to fund retiree health care. The same will happen when we pass Intro 1096. So to recap everything, Medicare Advantage is significantly worse healthcare plan than traditional Medicare. Retirees are only being placed on Medicare Advantage to bail out the unions, something the city should be doing without cutting retirees or active workers' healthcare. Introduction 1096 will help us to get there, taking retirees out of this fight and putting the responsibility of funding the stabilization fund solely on the mayor and the city council. This is a budget fight. Just like we wouldn't cut funding for schools or libraries, we shouldn't be cutting funding for active workers. And I believe if we make this a budget fight, just like we make every other part of our city a budget fight, we will be having a completely different conversation. And so for the mayor and the speaker and the MLC to lie to us, to say that this isn't a budget fight, this is something that has to be done to save active members' healthcare plan, is a lie. And so we're gonna have a conversation today about that lie and give you the truth behind this fight and the truth of hopefully where our future goes. Thank you so much.
Mary Ann, you're up next. You can either sitting down.
Okay.
Is it on? Oh, yep, here we go.
Yes.
You have questions for me?
Well, do you have remarks to start with? Mary Ann?
I think we just moved.
Just questions.
Okay. Well, before I go to questions, do either of our other panelists have anything they want to add? No. No? Okay. I know Chris explained this, but I'm personally still not clear about it. The union does not have any role in collectively bargaining retiree health benefits?
So for active workers, the union can negotiate for active workers' benefits and their retirement benefits. Unions cannot negotiate for current retirees because we are not in the union. Once you retire, as Chris had mentioned, according to Pittsburgh plate glass case, we are not in the union. So they can collectively bargain for active workers and active workers' future retirement benefits. And how they would know they can prove what we're saying is accurate, they can go to their own collective bargaining agreement. And every collective bargaining agreement, Article 1, would say that this contract, this collective bargaining agreement, is effective on the people who are in appointed titles in the agency in which they work in that union. Retirees are not in the union. So that contract, which you should know, retirees don't vote on contracts, so it can't affect them. You as an active worker have every right to elect your officers and to negotiate and ratify your contracts. Us as retirees do not. So if you were to negotiate something that would be, it's permissive, you could, but here's where you're gonna get tripped up. If you do something like the Medicare Advantage plan, for example, which some of the union leaders thought that they could negotiate for us, you think it's a benefit, but in actuality, it was a diminishment of what we had, which is why we fought back. So you didn't understand, or they didn't understand, that what they were doing was diminishing our benefits. We didn't have a say in that conversation, we didn't have a seat at the table, and we weren't even in the room. So that's why in Pittsburgh plate glass, the court said that the needs of retirees are materially different to the needs of active workers. And that's why they're not in the same collective bargaining unit. And also, the law allows that a union can represent active workers in their union for wages, hours, and work conditions. That's really the only ability that a union has. Retirees don't have wages, hours, and work conditions.
So, again, for people who are current employees, the union can negotiate with the city about what their benefits will be in the future when they retire, but
Yes.
not for current retirees.
Correct, because we made our deals. We retired a long time ago.
Or so you thought.
Well, I thought I retired 20 years ago, but clearly they wanted me to come back. Yes, because we are not at that table. We are not in the room. We don't have a say on that conversation. A promise made. When we say promise made, promise kept, we kept our end of the deal. They said, come work for the city. You'll never get rich. But when you retire, as in a form of deferred compensation, right? I see all the heads going. We all know those words. You will have city-paid health care, your Medicare with a city-paid supplemental, and your pension. So we all remember the same conversation.
Marianne, can you tell us about the issue in the lawsuit and where that now stands?
So we filed 3 separate lawsuits starting in 2021 in the middle of a pandemic. The first case was what the city had to pay up to because the law, Administrative Code 12-126, which many of you are familiar with hearing, says that the city will pay the full cost of health coverage up to whatever the HIP HMO rate is, that's the benchmark, for every employee, retiree, and their dependent. It would also pay for Medicare B reimbursement. And that's because in the definition of healthcare coverage, that includes contracts with the city and insurance companies. So active workers, you have a healthcare plan that pays 100% of your healthcare. Medicare retirees have 2 plans. They have a Medicare plan that covers the first 80% and a supplemental plan that pays that last 20% that Medicare doesn't pay. We have those 2 plans, you have 1. What else I need to answer your question?
And I'm sorry, I was reading something,
That's
the
okay.
status of the court case?
The status of the court case. So in that case, it was what the city had to pay up to. The city was trying to say, now forever, the HIP HMO plan is about, let's just say averages, it's about $1,000 individual, and family, it's about $2,500 is what the HIP HMO is. I'm assuming many of you are on the GHI plan. So your cost for that plan is a little bit higher. That court case was to determine what the benchmark is for someone who's on Medicare. That HIP HMO plan forever was about $1,000, well, when it started in 21, it was about $1,000. Medicare, that 20% plan that we have, that supplemental plan, only costs about $200 a month. It is well under that cap. The city argued that, no, the reality was it was only $7.50 and that was all they had to pay up to. So we took them to court for that, and we won that case all the way up to the Supreme Court. The city then went to impose co-pays on us for the first time in 60 years. $15 co-pays, as a matter of fact, on every service and every test. If your doctor was attached to a hospital, you are also recognizing facility charges. So now your $15 copay is a $30 copay. So if you are retired 20, 30, 40 years ago, or you have a small pension like most of us do, 2/3 of DC 37 retirees make under $35,000 like myself, and 1/3 of them make under $12,000 a year. Top paid cops and firefighters in 1980, they make $15,000. They take a 50% pension. That was $8,000 back then. Today, their pensions are only about $26,000. Think about what that $15 or $30 copay equals up to. Now think about physical therapy 2 or 3 times a week, cardiac rehab 2 or 3 times a week, occupational therapy. Those cost you 15, 15, and 15, or 30, 30, and 30. Chemotherapy 3 times a week, 30, 30, and 30. So that copay case is still being argued. We have not settled that yet. After we were winning all of those, the mayor decided, well, I'm just going to double down with the agreement of the Municipal Labor Committee, decided to strip all of our choices of plans and forced us into the Aetna Medicare Advantage plan, the new plan that they created. We got an injunction in the Supreme Court. The appeals court affirmed that decision that they could not do that to us.
The mayor appealed, and it brought it just this past May 15th up to the New York State Court of Appeals to argue that. We're waiting for a decision which we hope will be affirming the two lower courts within the next few weeks. We have 3 lawsuits that we filed. We've won 11 times in court. We've had no losses and 3 unanimous appeals decisions. That's not any indication of what this court will do. We don't know what they will do. And even if they do overturn that decision, the lower court's decision, it doesn't negate the facts that the 2 lower courts found, that the plans were a diminishment and that people would be harmed, as Aetna even admitted that in court to the judge. At the end. Remember it.
Go ahead, what's next?
Okay, well, Neil?
Yeah, I just wanted to, on this question of who negotiates for whom. The MLC is a coalition of unions that all have contracts with the city of New York. In order to be a member of the MLC, you have to fulfill that requirement. The DC 37 Retirees Association in the last 5 years has twice requested under Ed Hissett when he was the president and under Bob Gervasi when he was the president to join, pay dues to the MLC. They said we could not. They said we were not, we do not have a bargaining certificate. This is what Mary Ann was talking about, and therefore we could not be part of the MLC. We were not privy to what went on in terms of these negotiations that affected more than 50,000 city employees who were represented by DC 37 retirees. And we spoke to Garrido about that. We tried to speak to Aaron Foley about it, etc., but to no avail. And you know, this is a very undemocratic and very opaque process. So I'll go into that later on. It's a very, you know, it is an unbelievable process that Mary Ann has gotten a huge amount of information. Kudos to her. She ferrets out all this stuff. It's incredible. But we found out pieces, little pieces here, little pieces there, to find out what they were planning to do to us. And myself and others brought it to other retiree organizations and to alert them to what was going on behind our backs.
Okay. Michelle, is there anything you want to add?
I think when we get into our questions, not really, as folks have said, this was, well, I guess when we get into our questions, I'll get a little bit more deeper as to what I think is wrong here.
Okay, and we have been joined by Kyle Simmons. And Kyle, I mentioned that you are the head of a local. Which local are you the head of?
Good evening. I'm the president of the City Laborers Union Local 924 for the last 23 years and 9 months.
And can you tell us a little about how this whole picture affects your members as active employees and as they look ahead to their retirement? How are their current benefits affected by what's been going on or what may go on?
I can tell you what can happen in the future. Right now we have benefits. It is diminished. You know, unfortunately, it has been diminished over the last number of years, and you know, what's going on now, what they're trying to do is not going to solve the issue. It's just like a regular Band-Aid, and it's going to be pulled off because this is a national issue, not just a local issue. I'm here because of the fact that if the retirees got to pay today, when the future of my members retire, they're going to be paying more then. And you know, when I came into my presidency, I always told people I came in with a silver spoon in my mouth because I didn't fight for these benefits. The retired individuals allowed me to have the benefits that I'm enjoying today. I may enhance the wage, but when it comes down to vacation, sick, the pension benefits and things of that nature is because of what they've done, they paved the way. So
When
they had.
when they were active employees.
Right,
Yeah.
they paved the way when they was active employees. So they knew what we needed back then, and now that they're retired, they know what they need now to survive. So that's why I'm here to support them, because, it's like almost like a no-brainer in the sense that a for-profit institution is there to make money. They don't make money by providing services. They make money by diminishing services. So we have to stand with these retirees. They was promised something, and if they can do this to the most vulnerable population, because that's what you are now, you're vulnerable now. But they forgot y'all a sleeping giant because y'all know how to fight, you was willing to fight, and you wasn't afraid to fight. And because of the actives, they've been given all of this stuff. They didn't have to bleed and die and suffer for the things that they enjoyed, so it's easy for them to give it away.
As a leader of active employees, when you hear people in the administration and at the leadership of some of the municipal unions saying that, to put it kind of bluntly, they've got to take something away from the retirees in order to protect the benefits for the active employees. How do you react to that?
It's dead wrong. You just don't do that. You're opening up the door for other actives. We know our pensions is constitutional. Unions, MLC can decide to say, let's have a constitution, in the state and help support it. And then they diminish the pension so they can get something for the actives. I think it's a slope that you don't really want to go down. Once you open up certain doors, it's hard to close it. So you don't open up these doors. Let the retirees enjoy what they was promised. They're not asking for anything more.
Thank you. Chris, I have a question for you. I've heard it said that a problem with your bill is that somehow it has to be done by the state legislature, that it can't be done by the city council. But you said that the current benefits are set by the city council and have been for some time. So is that argument that Albany has to be involved, is that just bogus?
It is. Albany can do it for the rest of the state. They can do it for state employees. But New York City and the New York City Council specifically has always legislated for retiree benefits. That's how it was 25 years ago. That's how it was 50 years ago. And nothing has changed, and it shouldn't change. There is a misinformation being spread. And, to come from a place of vulnerability as a council member, you're expected to be an expert on everything. I ran a campaign on a land use platform, right? Talking about development and issues about development. So when you have these big unions and the administration come to you and say, here's 500 pages on health insurance, become an expert, you're gonna say, all right, let me just listen to what, DC 37 and UFT are telling us, right? They're trusted partners in this. However, when you start actually looking at the details, you start realizing that it's a lot of lies and that they're using this confusion and not even talking about the retiree fund benefit trust fund as a source of funding retiree healthcare. All they want to talk about is the stabilization fund. And so they use these terminologies to confuse council members to say, oh wait, like, we need to do this. And so it's been our job, and she's done the best job at educating not just active employees, retirees, but more importantly, educating council members on all the facts and the decisions they have to make.
So the retiree health benefit trust initially used it was supposed to be created, was created by Mayor Bloomberg, and it was supposed to be a fund that would pay for the future of healthcare. Because if you know your healthcare, or most bills paid by the city, is you pay as you go. You get a bill, you pay it. They recognized that with escalating costs of healthcare, they wanted to be able to create like a savings fund, and that was a trust fund for healthcare. The RHBT, for short, Retiree Health Benefit Trust, became that fund. It had been misused a little bit by some of the mayors in the past, but that's really what that fund was created for, pay for healthcare futures. The Health Insurance Stabilization Fund is completely different. It was created through a collective bargaining process, and it is not paying for all of your healthcare. That fund had one purpose, and this will get into the weeds, and I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. The law says the city will pay for the full cost of health care, and it does. And the last part of that law says up to the HIP HMO rate. So whatever that HIP HMO rate today, and let's work on round numbers because I stink at math. So if the plan that the benchmark, the HIP HMO is $1,000, but the plan that you want is $1,500, well, the city will pay up to that $1,000, and that additional $500 a month is on you. In order to keep your healthcare premium free, they created this Health Insurance Stabilization Fund. Because back in the day, when they did this in the 80s, the HIP plan, which was the benchmark, was higher than everything. So the GHI plan was lower, and all your other choices were lower. So in those days, why did the fund get so rich with billions of dollars in it? Was because they made this deal that if the HIP fund was higher than the GHI plan, that difference would go into the stabilization fund and keep it funded. And they also negotiated that the city in 1986 would give them $10 million a year, or 1983, $10 million, and by the third year, $35 million, and that's never changed since 1986. So if you're gonna say they should collectively bargain for more, you're damn right they should have. They should have made sure that the city is paying for the full cost of health coverage, and they are putting more money in the stabilization fund since the 80s, but they weren't. And then that fund's been misused. That fund can only be used if the labor unions and the municipal coalition and the mayors agree to it being used in the same way. So that fund was only supposed to pay for any instance in which you were in a plan that was above the HIP rate. So that's a little bit. So now if you say what that number looks like today, an individual plan, right now the difference between HIP and GHI is about $25 a month individual. That would have come out of the stabilization fund instead of your pocket. And the family plan is about $250 a month. That again would come out of the stabilization fund and not your pocket, because the goal was to give you a choice of premium-free plans. But when they misused that fund, that was that stopgap to pay for that difference. That then put you at risk in you having to pay premium, or the municipal coalition having to negotiate that the city would end up picking that up. That's the stabilization fund and the Retiree Health Benefit Trust. Now, when that plan had a lot of money in it, that fund, Health Insurance Stabilization Fund, James Hanley in 2001 said, hey, listen, you guys got a lot of money here. We should do something with it. And that's how PICA was born. PICA stood for psychotropic, injectable, chemotherapy, and asthma. And then later, because the cost became so high, it only went down to IC, injectables and chemotherapy, and the other two went back into the welfare funds. So they created a drug plan to kind of pull the costs away from the union welfare funds and put it into the stabilization fund. And then unfortunately, the cost of drugs skyrocketed and it was draining the stabilization fund even faster, on top of them misusing it. And that's why today, there's no money in that. Again, though, that stabilization fund does not pay for Medicare eligible retirees. It only pays for premium difference between active workers and non-Medicare retirees, and it gives the unions an additional cash for their welfare funds
for their prescription vision and dental. And in those last couple of agreements, it was only $165 a year per member active and per retiree as a supplement to what they did collectively bargain to finance their stabilization funds. It was icing. They didn't have to do that, but they did. So no one, when the Medicare retirees talk about health insurance stabilization fund, they don't generally get a benefit out of that. It doesn't help them and it doesn't pay for their premium. That fund was literally designed to pay for the premium difference between HIP and GHI for active workers and non-Medicare retirees. Why? Because they're on the same plan.
Not to get too far into the weeds.
That's a repeat.
It's easy to get further into the weeds, however.
It's too late to warn us about that.
Sorry.
So the main point, and I think I want to underline what Mary Ann said, the stabilization fund had a lot of money, a lot of money.
Billions.
And when the city and the union saw this pot of gold, they said, how can we use this in ways that were off-label, so to speak, not for the purpose intended? So one was the type of plan, another was this 165, which was a supplement to the welfare funds, but it was used in other ways as well. And most of those ways were prefaced with the idea as long as the stabilization fund was solvent. The stabilization fund is no longer solvent. Most of these uses also included a trade-off. The trade-off was the 165, well, there had to be diminishment of costs of health benefits. What does that mean? Sometimes it means higher copays. If you go to an urgent care facility, what is your copay? Is it $100 if you're inactive? Well, that was part of the deal of how we're going to save money to fund that 165. The 165, by the way, ended last fall. It's not being paid into welfare funds. The copay, if you go to a urgent care center, still exists. You know, I know Mary Ann did, I took some labor relations courses when I was active, and it seems like somebody failed negotiations 101. Because if you sign an agreement that says one party is obligated to keep paying and the other is not, that's a very bad deal.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a genius to figure that one out.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing we're up against. In terms of the PICA plan, one of the deals was that there was a very loosey-goosey plan for the pharmacy benefits manager to manage those payments. And they were making out like a bandit. And so a couple of years ago, a new team came in, renegotiated the contract, and tightened it up. But it was too late. They already gave away the golden goose's eggs. And this was horrible. It was done by the management team at the MLC. That's the way they ran their house. And now they want to come to us and tell us, you have to find ways to save money. Well, and I have to say one other thing. Are there other, don't listen to this. His mom was a teacher. Are there any teachers in the house? So one of the deals that was made was in the UFT had a contract that they were owed back money. De Blasio says we don't have money to give you your back pay. But if you'll agree to that money being taken out of where? The stabilization fund, that pot of gold, you can have your 2014, you can have your back money. I don't begrudge the UFT members the back money. And if the city didn't have the money, maybe they should have borrowed from the stabilization fund and pay it back when they had money. But they don't have to do that. They took the money and ran. Why is the stabilization fund broke? Because of deals like these. And we should not be forced to pay for the mistakes, blunders, the connivance. I can get to some worse words. I'm trying to be polite and not use the bad words, but there was a lot of things done wrong. And they should not have been using that fund as a piggy bank to do all these wheeling and dealing. And what we're seeing, I think Kyle used the term Band-Aids. Well, there is a crisis in healthcare, there's a crisis in prescription drug benefits, and it needs real solutions that are systemic solutions. It does not need Band-Aids, they won't work, they're time limited. We saw the PICA program implode because they couldn't fund it enough, because the more that we paid, the more the pharmaceuticals wanted, and the more that the insurance companies will want. We need a systemic change, not a change that takes away from retirees and actors, and maybe we'll go into. There are some proposals on the table, unfortunately, to hit actors starting January of next year, which are very bad. So one other thing that I want to say, and I'll say it now, I don't know if I'll get a chance later on, but these givebacks, and that's what I'll call them, these givebacks disproportionately hurt the low-income members and retirees of DC 37. They are primarily Black and Latin and women members. And we should underline that fact because this is a reality that we face. The average pension, toss this figure into the hopper, of DC 37 retirees, about $23,000 a year. We had somebody on our board that I was on, she actually was a school crossing guard that used to cross my kids, right, on their way to school. I won't say her name tonight, but her pension and Social Security combined, less than $15,000 a year. How can you afford to pay the high cost of prescription drugs, the high cost of medical care, pay rent, and all the other things that we need? It's an impossibility. This is a criminal act that is going on.
Thank you. Unless any of the panelists want to weigh in on and say something, maybe we'll go to the audience for questions.
I thought that we were gonna have questions here. I had prepared some answers for folks. So let me kind of just
Oh,
jump
okay.
in with a little bit of information for everybody. Firstly, let me say whether you're here by obligation or information, thank you so very much. Because you will be the ones that go out and shepherd the information. So don't, because that's how we're gonna get it around. Let me also tell you that this fight is not only for us, it's for the very people that are punishing us, right? This is the healthcare for city council, the mayor. So this is kind of backward as well.
The city councilman, this is his healthcare.
This is, so you're fighting against your own odds. There was this question that said, well, what's the role of retirees in the union? You say, well, we're not in the union, so what's your role? So I said that we fully support our retirees association. We have an association. We're hearing from the brothers and I. All right, we have members, we have offices, we have committee leaders. Just because we leave that room doesn't mean that we stop being active. And a lot of folks that are in here that know me already, it's almost been almost 50 years now. Did I work on shop floors? Yes, I did. But the multitude of my time is spent around. So we provide the inspiration and the mentorship for active members by example and the possibility to continue to make them understand that their success is through collective actions. We protect our historical achievements. Again, just because we step out doesn't mean that we don't know who you are. We don't want you to maybe make the same errors we did or do better, than we did as we help and shepherd you through. We say, how do unions represent retirees? We embrace all unions, must embrace all of our volunteer hours. Again, we stepped out, but we're still helping, we're still volunteering. We fight to protect and preserve all rules, acts, laws, contractual language. This is what we're talking about now, that labor has officially and legally, in good faith, promised to deliver to us. We keep retirees secure and safe in their retirement. Retirees must be inspired to participate and contribute in all committees. Got a union, but we're still there. All we did was go through the door, right? So we still want to be a part of committees, programs. We want to volunteer, lobby ethics in our favor. I don't want to go to lobby day and carry something that's against me. I don't want to do that. I don't care how many buses you send me. Right? I don't want to be added to, what is this? You have a political action committee, right? And you need my money. I keep every way possible. You're getting in touch with me and saying, I need $10 here, I need $20, $30. But you're using my money against me. That doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. And again, it's a matter of educating the folks that are going to be me in how many years? If you live that long. I always tell the young workers, if you live that long. We volunteer, by the way, on constituency. I don't know if you've heard about the New York City's Coalition for Labor Union Women. The city's CBTU, our black organization. Apollo, okay, is for our Asian organization. Veterans, this is all a part of unions. Our black law is for our Hispanic and private book. Retirees get information about switch. How do retirees get their information about switch to Medicare Advantage? This is interesting. There was no discussion. None. You said me everything else. You talked to me about everything else. And when I retired, I didn't hear about this at all. The only time I picked up on this was when I was in a meeting, again with our brothers here. I knew there was some agitation, and particularly about Mr. Guerrero. His attitude had changed. You got people that are moving every day. They need to give folks information. So just think about it. You're moving and you're changing things for people who are using, what I always say, we're using the benefit. How could you not be consulting with me? You may have all these bright ideas, but until I explain to you what's going on, it's the same thing when we work, by the way. You know when you work and the boss says, doing one thing 50, same way every day, and the boss comes in one day and says, oh, we're going to change this. How can you do this without sitting down and consulting me? You don't know what I do, so to change, you don't know what may affect me. And that's all we have to do. And to this day, I must tell you, I still haven't had any official notice about this. Again, we're so glad for Mary Ann. We are. Her inspiration, her strength, what keeps her going. This has become her life. It has become her family. There are so many folks who we've lost folks in the families. And the crucial thing here that everybody realizes now is this all was done and dusted around COVID. See, they felt that everybody else, because a lot of this opened up for a lot of us at that time. Now when we look back and say, oh, listen, and guess what? The folks that you have trained, we haven't lost our training. We may have retired. We always say, I'm retired, but I'm not expired. So you can't get mad at me because I'm doing everything that was expected of me to go out there, right, against management and within my community to do. And that's really cool. Right? More of us can do a little bit more, you know, because the more everybody does, then it's less that I have to do. But we do it from our hearts. We really continue that, you know. There was a couple of other questions I just want to go through quickly. How did you find out? I told you that. I never really found out. Better for what we do together, you know. I wanted to talk a few minutes about our healthcare now. My healthcare now. I think about it right now. I have no issues. I have a doctors, and I visit them regularly. Such trust. I have them. You see how moved I am? I have them getting updates from me about what's going on here in Medicare Advantage. Because they're saying it's costing them a lot. It's costing them a lot of time. More paperwork. Think about what they take up. They take an oath that they will do you no harm. They can't promise that. Because whatever they're recommending to you doesn't go into effect until, as our brother said, that the insurance company takes it. So the company insurance company may have that doctor write that script 2 or 3 times until it fits in so they can send it. So just think about it. And then I think about what could possibly happen to me in moving with this dimension. So we're blessed. I'll be quiet just a few minutes and let the other folks speak. And then there's a couple other questions I just want to go through again because I see kind of thinking, well, we're thinking things, you know, and we need the help of each and every one of them.
Okay, yeah, we're ready to go to the audience for questions, and there was, go ahead, and then there's one over here. But, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a retiree, and
Right in the mic.
I'm very grateful to Mary Ann and the whole organization and to the council member for supporting us. I would say, this isn't so much a question as a suggestion, because we do get into the weeds with the health stabilization fund. So I looked back, and the remarkable journalist Juan Gonzalez wrote about it for the Daily News at the time. And what he said was that the health stabilization fund is a little known fund that isn't regulated. And that's really all you have to know, is that and he said this agreement to plunder it for raises was bringing labor management cooperation to a new level. In other words, it was labor, instead of representing its members and trying to get the maximum out of management, was collaborating with management to harm us. And I think that's all you have to know, is that at that point, the Municipal Labor Committee stopped acting like a labor union and started acting like a tool of management. And together dipped into a barely understood fund that is not regulated and did this to us for the sake of temporary raises so that the unions could look like they'd done something for their membership. And that's all you need to know.
Question over here.
Hi, my name is Tony Lee. I'm a board member of the organization of staff house. I live in the neighborhood, so I just dropped by. What I'm asking, if the court case don't rule in our favor,
Right.
state law goes to state legislature, get mandates to our assembly and state senators to, because they can override court judicial review, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but can I get that microphone?
So I want you to know that we have 2 legislations that we're working on. One is Intro 1096 that Councilman Marte has in the City Council. The second, we did do legislation on the state level. However, Mario Salento from New York State AFL-CIO, UFT, Michael Mulgrew, Henry Garrido, DC 37, and a couple of their peers, basically intimidated my state sponsor to drop my state bill. I still have an assembly sponsor, I don't have a Senate sponsor. That bill was supposed to protect all New York State municipal retirees. Hold on a second. So because they interfered in that, I am now still trying to figure out how to help not just the people in this room, but people around the state of New York and Long Island, for example. We're helping Nassau County, Ithaca, Cortland. These are people who retired just like we did and are fighting the same battle. But this bill that we were working on would have protected them. This city council bill that Councilman Marte has is only for the city workers. Go ahead. He struck our bill.
Okay.
But he put it in.
He put in a new bill that doesn't really affect us. That he took the date out of the bill that would have protected everyone in this room from having those co-pays forced onto us in 2021. When he dropped that bill, it basically killed that language that was going to protect them. Because what will happen is, so what he's asking is, when the senator struck the bill, the original language that we had, it was to prevent us from being forced into a Medicare Advantage plan, and it was also to require that they not pass those co-pays on to you that the city put on us in January 1 of 2022. It said for city workers, well, it should have said city workers, that the bill was effective December 31 of 2021. And that was because the very next day, they put those $15 co-pays on us that for the first time in 60 years. By taking that date out, because that was one of the oppositions by the New York State AFL-CIO, which was representing the AFL affiliates, DC 37 UFT. By taking that date out, it would still have the same effect. Why? Because today those co-pays are $15, and the city already told us that they're not going to diminish them, that they're going to go up. So if tomorrow they're $50, it will still force you into a managed care or Medicare Advantage plan because you will no longer be able to stay in traditional Medicare with your city-paid supplement. So if no one's listening to me that's an elected official, that if you don't listen to why we're telling you that date was important in the bill, it's going to have the same effect just down the road. And as Kyle and Michelle were talking about the Band-Aid, this is kicking the can down the road. It will give you allow you to stay in Medicare with your supplement for a couple more years. But after that, you may not have a choice. Because as we spoke very amply about, Neil and I, the income levels of DC 37 retirees and other municipal workers that have been retired 30, 40, 50 years, we cannot afford those co-pays. That's why for the last 60 years, we did not have them. The unions negotiated those co-pays to finance raises. And I don't want to say unions because not all of the unions did it. It was the Municipal Labor Committee with a very heavy voting structure because many unions were against that. And they were also against Medicare Advantage, like Kyle. We have a few unions that have been our heroes. So I want to point that out too, because when we say the MLC, they're kind of painted to be the bad guy. But it's really the leadership, because all the unions didn't agree, and Kyle can tell you that. Those were very contentious days where many unions were like, well, that's what leadership is saying, but then there were a group of unions that said, no, we don't agree with this. This isn't the way to do this. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, people like to use the judicial system, the counterbalance. What happened, they rule against you.
Well, why did they come against us?
No, I said, what if they rule?
The judge, the court.
Yeah.
So if the court says, so sorry, we're not affirming the lower decisions,
Right.
the mayor could put us in Medicare Advantage.
Unless we have a state law that stops.
Or a city bill, or both. Yes, which is why we're doing both, because honestly, I don't know what friends we have. I can't really trust anyone. We've been lied by to so many people. Some say, I got your back, and then they kind of hug me and it almost feels like they want to stab me in the back. But this is why we said, let's do city legislation to protect city workers, city retirees, for example.
It should be for the whole state.
Well, and then
We had some technical difficulties here, but what we ended up doing was, I was speaking about, was having a bill, which we did in the state and the assembly, to benefit all state municipal workers. And unfortunately, the New York State AFL-CIO and the United Federation of Teachers and DC 37 interfered in that legislation and pressured the state Senate sponsor, Senator Peter Harcum, to drop the bill, which basically killed our legislation, not just for us in this legislative session, but for every single municipal retiree in the state of New York, and failed to allow them to be protected against diminishing their health benefits in retirement. To a very similar situation has happened here. So this is why we were very upset about this, is that the people who were supposed to protect us from all avenues, from our former unions all the way up to the state Senate, did not listen to the message, and unfortunately were succumbing to pressure from some very large union leadership instead of the people that they were elected to protect in the first place. We will have to bring back this bill with all of our retiree organizations around the state next year, and we will bring it back and hope to get this passed then. Intro 1096 still needs your support because hopefully we can get that bill passed faster than we can on the state side.
That don't have a track record to take the pledge, to sign on to 1096. And that's the only way they're going to win. The only way they're gonna win your vote, your family's vote, because we can't get there. Right now, we have 16 co-sponsors on 1096. And as many of you said, there's a lot of money, a lot of influence that are telling me and those 15 members not to get on those bills. But the reason we're on those bills and taking this heat is because of you. Because of what you've done. You inspired us to get on those bills. Sometimes you scared them to get on the bill. Let's be honest. But you got us on those bills. And so if we continue to organize, if we continue to put pressure, we can have 25 members soon. And we can call for another hearing on this legislation so we can get it to pass. I know we can do it because of what you've done already. And so I want to thank you, but the fight continues, and I know we're going to win.
Okay. Well, thank you to Chris. Thank you to our panel members. Thank you to all of you. I think we've got our marching orders. Thanks.
You are the first.